These are the most sword-like boffers I have ever used. These are boffers made by FakeSteel Armory, and they sent a few. These are first and foremost LARP swords, live-action roleplay, but FakeSteel believes that they have the merits to be applicable to HEMA practice, historical European martial arts. So this won't be a normal review per se, but rather an evaluation of their applicability to HEMA. With the disclaimer that I didn't pay for them myself, but I'm also not getting any kickback if you buy them either, so do what you will. To start off, they have two lines. The main line is meant to simulate a real sword in appearance as close as possible, while the other line, the training line, is meant to just check off the boxes on performance and not worry so much about the actual appearance. They still look the part in silhouette, but they cut corners to keep the cost down. These look nice. The Messer even has a real wood handle, but they're not necessarily applicable to the kind of use I would want to be buying these for. But if you do find yourself in a situation where you can't use actual steel swords for whatever reason, these are not bad-looking alternatives. But it's the training line I'm really interested in because this is where we get into that economic incentive. They come in at around $115 a pop, give or take. The fancier ones push that up towards the $150 range. But at $115, you can almost get 3 of these for the price of 1 training steel, which is a real consideration if you're looking for club loaners. What the training line gets you is a polyurethane blade with a fiberglass core and a rubber hilt. With that price consideration, they are in direct competition with other synthetic offerings. Hard synthetics have some merits going for them. They're not steel, so they are much cheaper and more legally flexible if that is a limitation you face. But that's about all they've got going for them. They'll bust you up just about as bad as steel, so you need to wear the same level of protection, and they just don't offer training options that aren't covered by steel. It's the classic training option choice. Pad the fencer or pad the sword. If you mostly train steel, then padding the sword offers new options. And in the realm of padded swords, these really shine when it comes to handling. With a lot of boffers, handling characteristics are not really a high priority, sometimes giving you points of balance like, whoa. But then you grab hold of one of these and, nice. And even on the sabers that don't have pommels, the balance is still spot on to their steel counterparts. It might just be a fiberglass core, but when you pick it up and swing it around, it really feels like they just took an actual sword and just sheathed it in foam. So as far as the in-hand feel is concerned, they are excellent substitutes for the real deal. You'll never fully forget that you're just swinging around fiberglass and foam, but it's a much more convincing effect than other options I've tried. So they feel nice to swing around, but how about when you actually hit something with them? Compared to steel, you'll immediately notice that they bounce. So sometimes when you go to make a bind, you end up binding not quite where you intended to. But once a bind is made, you actually get pretty good feedback on that. They don't slip and slide all over the place. They actually bind really well. But what often follows from a bind is a thrust, and this is my first real misgiving with using these for HEMA. In that while the blades do technically flex, that flex is stiff enough that I can rest pretty much my whole body weight on it and not actually bend it all that much. So practically speaking, the tip is about the extent of how kind your thrusts will be. For context, the LARP environment these were intended for don't allow thrusts at all, so that tip flex is for accident, not for intent. Quick point about the rubber guards, they are flexible, not so flexible that you should try to clock somebody with them, that will hurt. Much like the blade, they flex for accidents, not for intent. But critically for a HEMA application, that rigidity means these guards actually work, which is a lot more than can usually be said for boffers. The other caution here is that yes, they're padded, but that padding has limits, and you need to make sure that you don't take the fact that they're padded as justification to go hog wild with them. I think it's harder for people to respect foam and fiberglass than it is for them to respect steel. But in a sparring context, you should be really treating these with equal care. The padding may have jumped from your body to the blade, but the effect on target still ends up being kinda similar. Which gets me to the relationship I see between these, steel, and the level of gear and intensity. Which is to say, at any intensity, the steel will essentially sit 1 tier higher than the fake steel. If you're doing simple, slow, methodical drills, put a mask on with this, but you can probably go with nothing with this. If you take that up to a casual level of sparring where you are pulling your hits, with the steel you'll want mask, gloves, and jacket. This you can probably just do mask and padded gloves. If we take that intensity to a level where we shouldn't be with steel, you could still be using this as long as you're fully geared, with the exception of thrusts. I stress, pull your thrusts with these. So with all that in mind, where do these belong? Now the obvious one is that they are a relatively cheap way to get a lot of swords very quickly on a club level to give to people as loaners. You can populate a class with them, get people working through drills, help them developing those skills before they make the big investment of buying the gear, the swords, and everything else. And while I do think they hit too hard to serve as an option of something you can put into the hands of complete beginners and let them go a little crazy with sparring games, they do have a place, I believe, as a stepping stone on their way to full steel, once they have a base layer of protection to help make up the difference. But once you're past the beginner stage, do they retain value? Yes, as I said before, you can step down your level of protection relative to steel. You can ditch your jacket, especially in the summer, and go at it with these, just wearing some hardpoint protection. They're a perfect opportunity to practice techniques you just can't pull off in the bulk of full gear in an adversarial context. More to that point, where they're really, really interesting to me is in practicing grappling, disarms, and takedowns. Because trying to do all that in full gear is a mess. You really want the dexterity they expect you to have in the manuals. So all the flexible components of this give you the opportunity to work those grappling plays through their execution without having to worry quite so much about catching with something or other. It will give and buy you that cushioning to continue with the play. So yeah, I think they're onto something here. If you share any of those use cases, I'd definitely consider checking them out.